morning, everybody. My name is Mosamo Tuitela de Abano, Mo for short. My friend Matt here, we are arguing the affirmative for our policy, which is Southern California Police Agency should expand community policing strategies. I'm going to be going over three major points. The first is going to deal with the stats and the issues that are presented from our police in our communities. And the second point is going to deal with the relations between the police and the communities themselves. And my final will be the solvency and telling how we can actually help mend a lot of these issues here. Off the top of the head, many would agree that Southern California communities aren't exactly on neighborly terms with local law enforcement. There are common stereotypes for Californians, just as any subgroup may have. Ours happen to be horrible drivers, we're shallow, over-dramatic at times, etc. But cutting the niceties, we are talking about the area in South Central that has given the world NWA's famed message of FTP, which one can be sure was popularized enough to not have to reveal what either acronym stands for. In Southern California, for the last 3 years, in California in general, for the last 3 years, we have led the nation in police versus civilian killings. And a lot of these circumstances do involve weapons, and a lot of them don't. In 2015, the Washington Post created a database of police shootings, and the first year that was recorded here, it says that in 2015, 138 people were killed in California. 190 people were killed in California. The following year, in 2016, 138. And this year alone and counting, we are at 144 cases of police on civilian deaths. Relations between the SoCal police and communities have been rather abrasive since the 90s, when crime was at its height in America, specifically in Southern California. Police Chief Charlie Beck is often credited with guiding force in helping to improve community relations in South Los Angeles over the last 15 years. Prior to Beck, there was a chief of police by the name of, Chief Gates, who was a little more militaristic in his ideals and also his policies. However, Beck, within the last 15 years, has helped to integrate the LAPD department with more minorities in the communities. Prior to this, LAPD was primarily white and male. Over the last 15 years, it seems that they have been able to implement the majority of 45% of the LAPD now is Hispanic, which is great. However, the mistrust in the communities is still very relevant. Here we go. From one of the communities in Watts, a martial arts instructor by the name of Francisco McClure, a black man who was alive during the Watts riots in the LA area, said that back then it was just whites against blacks. Now it's blue against blacks. The police just cleaned up their act a little. Despite his negative comments, it does show that there has been growth in these areas that have been the most abrasive. There has also been data here that states that the approval rating of a 2009 Harvard University study found that public opinions of the police to be much more positive since the reforms of the last consent decree, which was implemented in 2001. I'll touch on that in just a second. 83% of residents saying that LAPD was doing a good or excellent job. Still, the study found pockets of distrust among Black and Latino residents. When the police asked whether they treat all racial and ethnic groups fairly, 23% of Black respondents said almost never, compared to 14% of Latinos and 10% of whites. Also on the other side, under the militaristic view of the prior police chief, there was an independent investigative panel led by the now Secretary of State Warren Christopher that found too many patrol officers view citizens with resentment and hostility, and it pushed for an overhaul of the department's disciplinary system and a shift toward community policing and resignation of the militaristic Chief Gates. There has been time and time again with riots, shootings, and everything, where the popularized belief is that race is what's driving these factors. That's not inherently true. As we know here, that it's not just black respondents who say that people aren't being treated fairly by police via race. There's also the 14% of Latinos and 2% of the whites due to this study here. These people are not a very large majority of all of Southern California. These are just small pockets of the lower income areas, the minority areas, the areas that have higher crime and lesser education. These factors help to build the case that the police aren't exactly the enemy, but they're not exactly very active in these communities either. It wasn't until recently, with Beck's leadership, that they have implemented actually having police that were raised in these neighboring areas to do foot patrols there. So they're not only familiarized with the area, but the areas are familiarized with them. I actually speak on this a little bit here. It says here that Captain Martin Beza, who grew up in a nearby LaSalle Park, said officers who were raised in the Hollenbeck area and attended Roosevelt or Garfield high schools are lining up to work in the area. When officers understand the language and the culture of the community, he believes the public is less likely to read sinister intentions into their actions. Things are changing. It's not so much that everybody's against the police these days. It's so much that there needs to be an understanding between the police and the communities themselves to bring a holistic nature between both sides. Thank you.